Hello, and welcome to the Santaland podcast. I created it just for you. I'm your host, Tony Felice. In each episode, I'll read to you for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about what we just heard. Like the cricket in my story, I'll guide you through a grown-up fairy tale, one that explores ideas of existence, identity, and the soul's journey through trauma, and the transformative power of love. By the end, you'll have heard my whole story, a sneak peek into the creative process of bringing a book to life. Maybe we'll read other books together. But for now, follow the wise cricket and discover the Santaland within yourself, a place of hope, connection, and peace that's already inside of you. This podcast is especially made for those like me who feel a little different and maybe talk about math at weddings or philosophy at funerals. And like me, maybe you have a loving husband, or a wife, or somebody else that loves you. If not, we're here to love you, because you're in good company, my dear friends, here in Santaland. Welcome back to the Santaland podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. On this episode, we will be reading chapters 10 and 11. So without further ado, chapter 10, Play Something Christmassy, Jason. Our journey in the portal has had unintended consequences. The frequency of it was felt by Tom here in the present. That's the thing about sound. It gets into all your places, even without ears. And time, the past or future, that doesn't matter. There's only the now. Our poor Tom. He stood at his desk and sobbed. Snotty. It moved through him like a beast with an appetite. Best to stand motionless and hope not to breathe, or pee, or be lunch. Let the beast move through, and for darn's sake, don't look at it. Right before she died, Wendy had brought Tom a better sentence than the one he'd been asking for, but Tom would not know that until the end of this story. For now, words blurred through tears on his computer screen. He typed, "What I learn, I want. What I want, I already have." When he'd read that out loud one time, David had stopped sweeping the barn. I was lucky to be in another part of the room. "Brilliant," David had replied about the first part. He kept sweeping. "I'm not sure," Tom had said. "Since my mom died, pretty much any bumper sticker'll do." "You'll get there, babe," David said. "Yeah. You know, it feels heavier than just that I wanted closure with my mama, and for us to have at least one conversation about that thing. You know, just, I don't know. Maybe I needed some weird validation. Shit, I'm an adult and not a little boy, so why is this still haunting me?" "I understand why," said David. Tom asked, "Why did my father have to die the day after it happened? Why have I never heard the truth? I'm not being selfish. I know that just her seeing me is enough." "No, you're not selfish, Tom. Don't say that," said David. "Sorry." "No need to be sorry, Tom. Just because it didn't happen doesn't mean that she didn't intend to do it. But I can't speak for her, hun. This was her experience too. Remember that," said David. "Man, that hit me in the gut. I know you're right. I know if I can get past the grief part, I'll see clearer. Like I said, I don't know why I'm haunted by this at this age, for crying out loud." "This is a heavy thing. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Tom. I wish you didn't." "Do you know that you're the only person who's ever apologized and tried to make me feel better? I mean, yeah, Wendy did when it happened, but since then, Claire doesn't know, because they told her nothing, and I'm not telling her anything either, because I don't want to ruin her childhood innocence, and I certainly don't want her looking at me differently. So thank you, David. Thank you." "You can do this," said David. "I will. I know I will," said Tom. "Listen, I'll make something warm and comforting for dinner. Let's put on one of our favorite movies tonight. You choose," said David. "Maybe something Christmassy, Jason?" Tom replied, and they laughed at an inside joke. Chapter 11, Gravity is a Beyotch, Excuse the language. It was later in the afternoon, and Tom's body was silhouetted by a window of blue. I was hidden in a plant on the windowsill, so I had a cricket's eye view of the two of them. "Want to know something crazy?" Tom said. "Of course," David replied. "So, I rewrote Einstein's equation to take into consideration time and gravity, and I added an exponential because otherwise it's not taking all dimensions into consideration. And you know what I found?" "What?" "I think reality is a beacon. Well, more specifically, a signal, not a donut, and certainly not a circle or a figure eight. And I think belief is a part of it, and there's a reason why." "You are weird, Tom," said David. "Stop. I'm sort of serious. I mean, if I cared about trying to prove this, which is stupid, I'm just some Joe Schmo, I would. But let's just say I validated my idea, and I was told that I'm not totally off my rocker from a trusted source." "Have you had more than a cup of coffee today, Tom?" asked David. "Shut up. That's not at all my point," Tom replied. Tom pointed to the computer screen that now displayed a series of computations. What am I looking at?" David asked. "Well, I started thinking about energy transference and..." "Before I lose you," David's face was a blank. Tom continued. So the fact that matter can be neither created nor destroyed, right? And because I'm fixated on what's broken right now, I started playing with a puzzle to occupy my time. And what came to me was an interesting parallel between math paradoxes and philosophical paradoxes, and I seem to have found a crossroads, a primer, if you will, that solves the puzzle. In the space of working on those paradoxes, I encountered something quite extraordinary. I know it sounds insane, but honestly, I feel like there's a purpose, and like the purpose of all of this, he gestured to everything around him. All of this is for continuous expansion and organization. Like, maybe chaos is an illusion. Things just fall into place, but maybe more specifically, they blink. "They blink?" asked David. "Yep. I can show you if I draw two parallel lines and then demonstrate that not only will they eventually merge, but that gravity is the reason." I'm sort of following," David said. "Think of it like this," Tom said, holding his hands together, palms facing each other. "My left hand represents all things that are known, and my right hand represents all things that are unknown. See how they come up against each other? Okay. Well, what about the space in between? See how small that gap is? Well, that is the space, I believe, that's occupied by the things that are known and things that are unknown simultaneously at all times." Sort of like that cat theory?" David asked. "Exactly. A Schrodinger's cat kind of thing," Tom replied. "So, in this space in the in-between, this is probably where fear runs rampant, along with ignorance and misunderstanding. But, David, it also has something extraordinary. Possibility. Okay? So, now imagine that instead of two hands, we have two parallel lines, which for all intents and purposes run parallel to infinity in both directions. That's the definition of parallel lines. Well, I think that what could possibly merge them is gravity." "Gravity?" David asked. "Yep, and gravity always gets what it wants." "I think I understand, but I'm a bit lost," David said. "Okay, without going too deep into the rabbit hole here, what if Einstein was only thinking in 3 dimensions? Energy expanding, okay? And we know time's involved, because remember that movie? The astronauts traveled at near light speed, and then time was distorted, sometimes drastically? How creepy was that, by the way? And he ended up in multiple dimensions, and the whole time, what was he trying to do? He was trying to gain a perspective on this new reality. So that got me thinking, what if what's truly missing from this equation is perspective? I mean, what are we observing traveling at the speed of light? And who's the observer? The thing moving, or the thing we see moving, or the people in the thing moving, or inside the thing moving? And what about God? The Creator's perspective. I'm telling you, that would describe reality more than a donut or a circle. On the screen, Einstein's equation was adjusted to include the elements Tom described. What this does is that it proposes that the structure of space-time, the flow of energy, and the unfolding of reality are influenced by an unrecognized variable, perspective. Okay, unlike conventional physics, which separates the observer and the observed, this theory integrates them into a recursive system of co-creation. By modifying Einstein's field equations, I'm introducing the concept of infinity plus one, where we explore how perception, gravitational potential, and subjective awareness generate fractal structures in reality. And that framework bridges classical physics, quantum mechanics, and philosophy into a unified model where love and gravity might be the two expressions of the same force. Perspective is everything, he said. Wow, that's interesting, David replied. I know, but in the end, who cares? That's my real discovery. Who cares? Replied David. I'll get to that. Let me finish. So if you could square reality, let's say a donut shape, okay? And that's like a torus, ever looping in on itself, all right? We could do that. But that's only if we could imagine the totality of our universe, which mean to suggest that it was finite, which we can't. So what if it's not a donut, but a signal, an offer to participate in creation? For a second, Tom thought, thank God this man loves me. I'd drive anyone else crazy. And then continued, but even if we figured all that out, I think it's about what we want. And who cares about, yes, the math is amazing, and I think maybe the math is God's way of communicating to us. And once we get the signal, we look beyond the math, okay, to the why of it all. Maybe reality is just asking, what do you want? What do we want? Asked David. Yeah, like, here's all this creation. What are you going to do with it? Deep, David replied, thinking, now I am a bit lost. With a sad sigh, Tom turned back to his computer. At the end of the day, maybe I'm just as delusional as a teenager. But isn't that kind of the magic of life? Isn't that kind of the point? Delusional curiosity? David gathered dirt into the dustpan. And then he said, maybe teenagers aren't delusional. Maybe they just have dreams and they figured out that no one's going to rescue them or do it for them, he replied, sleepily, the way David could magically toss off a piece of poetry or philosophy into the air while sweeping up the dirt or planting in it. Well, that's another way to think of it for sure, replied Tom. David swept over Tom's shoes. And you certainly aren't delusional, Tom. Jeez. I'm not? No. But I understand why you have to torture yourself about it. The silence after that statement hung in the air like prophecy. I wanted so bad to chirp, but I held my legs. I believe in you, Tom, David said, and then thinking, we're all waiting for you to believe in you again. He was reading my mind. I wanted to sing in approval, but I was afraid I'd interrupt the moment, so I held my song. But David just smiled at his husband and stood there. Tom knew that all of this was part of an idea, and he was right. He was on the tip of learning an answer that may lie in the consciousness part of physics that's never really talked about, because math is a way of describing the mechanics of things, as opposed to philosophy, which describes the why of those things, why the math is the way it is. Tom continued, and my thought is this revised equation that takes time and gravity into consideration is missing the perspective of the observer. So therefore, not only is reality everything plus one forever, because you have a thing plus the observation of the thing, which is complicated. But anyway, it's raised to the power of what you want. Einstein basically said, is the universe scary or a place of love? It's up to you to decide. And I think that's a clue. It's about choice and choosing. That's why the equation is raised to the power of n, with n equaling 1, which is your perspective, and within that, a question, a three-part question. Choose your favorite, number 1. Number 2, choose the more interesting or challenging one. Or 3, a poor choice, which would include choices made from fear or not making any choice at all. Part of a sentence was coming. Tom could feel it. I wanted to giggle out loud, but that would have been indulgent of me. Tom thought about other artists who believe that good is the enemy of great. Off on a tangent again, but it's relevant. The only enemy of good, Tom thought, is perfection. I wanted to shout, "Bingo, Tom! Only God is perfect. Our perception of it will always be flawed because we're just part of the I am. You can do it." Tom's face reddened. He remembered the last time he castigated himself in public. It was on TV, one of his more eccentric appearances. "You live, you die, you're reborn. That's my creative process," he told the late-night host. "It's like this idea is so..." The audience was enthralled. "Special, that you can and might likely screw it up. And that's why we die a little each time, with each book." Unfortunately, among the marquee lights of late-night hosts, that bulb had been one of the dimmest, and it was patently unfair to Tom. In wrapping up the show in his monologue, the host had reduced Tom to the cadre of artists they say are insane, using words they always use to describe them: Capote, Graham, Picasso, Tharp, you name it. Creative types. That's us. That's you reading this book. Creative types. After that TV interview, Tom took the hit and said nothing. His agent was furious, but for Tom, behind the back is better than in the front as far as a pie in the face goes. So it was fine. Tom wrote for Hollywood often. He knew what to expect. And writing for television was different than writing literature. He'd been told that enough. That's why tense was such a challenge for Tom, even now. And I'm certainly not helping the way I jump in and out of the narrative. David sang as if reading my mind. "We're tense about tense. Have you seen where it went?" "David, I'm kidding. This is a great start," he said with more cheer than Tom had heard in a while. Chirp. That time, it was easy for me to reach a high C. Okay. So, yeah, I'm as nuts as all that. I did work on a math equation, and I did take a lot of those things in consideration. And trust me, I had a moment of delusional grandeur where I thought, oh my God, I'm some Joe Schmo, and I came up with the answer to the universe. And I'm sure that plenty of other people out there have done the same thing. But I've never been the kind of person that can accept no for an answer. Or I remember asking a math teacher, "Why do you do it that way?" And he said, "Because that's the way it's done." And I said, "No, you need a better answer than that." Because I'm always looking for the logic of things, right? What is the space between what is known and what is unknown? What is that, and what does it look like? It's fascinating. What is the state of not being before it is being? And I, in my meditation on the beach in 2019, this idea came to me about an apple, and I wrote a book about it. We don't wander around saying, "I don't have an apple." But we will say, "I have an apple," but we don't wander around saying, "I don't have an apple, I don't have an apple," right? Because it's illogical. And so is the concept of zero, because I believe zero is everything, because there is no nothing. You can't count nothing, okay? Nor can you count the number of galaxies that exist before you count them. You have to start with one. Always. And one is a singular representation of all things that are. So when you have an apple, it is the singular representation of all apples that ever existed, because it's the idea as much as it is the thing. And that's where people get hung up, I think, on the mechanics of how things work. Great. Okay, so the music comes out of the radio. Awesome. And someone built the radio. I want to know why. Okay? And radio is important. Frequency is important, as we'll find out. You know, I'm an art school dropout who years later graduated at the top of my class in engineering, and I have made art my whole life. And I'm just one of those lucky people, I guess, that has two hemispheres that work simultaneously. And so I did come up with an equation in my search for God after my mother died, and other things that you'll find out about later. I needed to know why, because with no evidence of God, I needed to find out if God existed, and the only tools I had were math and philosophy and logic. And so I set out, and asked some questions of some very smart people, and I came to some very interesting conclusions about the difference between matter and energy. For example, I am matter, but I am also energy. Energy has agency, and agency has energy has agency, and agency has energy. Right? I am agency, I'm matter, so I also have energy. And things that are energy, like electricity going through a circuit, also has agency. It's a circular reference. I kept finding circular references everywhere. I looked at Euclid's mechanics, where we decide that this is a square, this is a circle, this is a dot, and these are two parallel lines, and those lines will never meet, except they will meet due to gravity. And I think maybe even what comes first before gravity is spin, and before spin is frequency. And there's a plane flying over to prove a point. The frequency is being interrupted by noise. So I didn't get to have a conversation with my mama. I never had a conversation with my mama. Several awful things happened to me over the years that have never been dealt with. And now I'm at an age where I had to deal with these things. When she died the way she did, regret is a horrible feeling, folks. It's a horrible feeling. Tell people you love them now. But you also have to draw your boundaries as well, because if some people aren't good for you, you have to choose yourself first. And I'm stretching longer into an episode than I have in any of the episodes before, because this one is important. This is a pivotal moment for this character and for me, because what really happened to me is what I think happened is that I squared reality. And at the end of it, I found a question, and that question was beautiful. What do you want? And the answer comes in 3 parts. And we'll find out more about that later on. There's no sense in giving away all the secrets up front. So thank you for tuning in one more time. And we'll find out about more secrets and about what the heck I'm talking about. And you can decide whether or not you want to stick around. And I really do hope you do, because as much as I can go off on a tangent and get excited about things, and as poorly as I might read sometimes, or as terrible as the sound might be, it is a authentic experience right now that you are living with me. You know, you are time traveling, and you are hearing this live. And if that isn't tense, I don't know what is tense. So on that moment, let's go whence.